Now that we have the editing screen for speakers in place, let's go ahead and enable the saving and canceling features. So let's go over what we're going to cover. First of all, in the previous module, we covered how to navigate from a list of speakers to the speaker details, and we took advantage of the routing service and the route param service from Angular. And we also made sure we got the full-blown speaker object, not the partial speaker, using our repository pattern. So in this module, we're going to follow up on that by adding in the save feature, the cancel, and we're going to do change tracking, and we'll even animate the visual cues for the change tracking. And then after that, we'll wrap up the editing features by showing how we can use cache data in other ways, such as using drop-down lists and lookups. So let's dive in this module and show how we can finish up the editing of the speakers. We've accomplished quite a bit. We've gotten our data onto the screen, and we made sure that we handled not just getting the data, but being smart about it. So we handled both getting partials and full items, and then merging them in the cache using Breeze. But now it's time to actually save the data. So we need to add some buttons on our speaker detail HTML. So we'll open that up and add a header bar up top. We'll put that right underneath the container fluid. So I'll create a div right there. There's nothing magical about this. We'll just create some buttons. First we'll have a button up here, and we'll add some styles to it. We use Bootstrap's button info. And then when we click on that button, we're going to want to make sure we use the directive ng-click to trap that event and then send it over to our controller. And this first button is going to actually call go back. So we're going to have a couple of buttons in this button bar. One is going to be just get off this page and go backwards, which might go back to like the speakers page if that's where we came from. And then we'll use an icon in here. So let's take that one button and let's copy it 2 more times because we're going to want a button for going back, one for canceling, and one for saving. This one will be cancel, this one will be save. Now all 3 of these should have different icons. For example, the back's going to have a left icon, and this one is going to have an icon for undo. And these icons all come with a combination of Bootstrap and Font Awesome. And then we're going to have an icon for save. What's nice is you get some IntelliSense here. So if I get rid of the icon and just go icon dash, and I hit Control Space in Visual Studio, I'm seeing down here icon and then SAVE right there. Now there's another important part of this as well, is I don't want to go back when I press cancel. Instead, I'm going to call a method in my controller called cancel. And when I save, I'm going to call a method called save. And I also want to be smart about canceling and saving. There's times where I may not want a cancel or save to happen. For example, have you ever had a user where they just press the save button over and over and over again? Well, maybe that was you. Well, what you want to do in this case here is prevent that from happening because we don't want somebody to press save, and while it's saving, press save again. So while it's actually saving, let's disable the button for cancel and save. And we can do that pretty easily with some directives. Here we'll use ng-disabled, and we'll set ng-disabled to be a new property inside of our view model of our controller. And that's going to be whenever we say can save, we'll allow saving. And when it's not can save, we'll disable it. Let's take that code right there, and we'll tack it on down here for the save button too. So we've got a few things that we need to implement inside of our controller. One of them is going to be the go back. Another will be the cancel. And then we have the can save. And then, of course, we have the save method. So now let's head off to the controller and take care of these. Now let's wire up these methods inside of the speaker detail controller. We'll close down the right pane. And first we've got some functions we have to define. So the first one is going to be cancel. So we'll have to create a cancel function. We had a go back button, so we'll create a go back function. Of course we had the save. And then finally we had a can save. Now the can save is going to be a little bit different. And to show you how it's going to be different, let's actually wire this up as an ES5 property. We could use a function here, but let's take advantage of the features that are available to us. So we want to be able to change how can save can work. We can say, go ahead and define the property on our VM, that's our object right here, and then we're going to define a property called can save. We'll use camel case, and then we'll create the getter for it. And the getter is going to be simply defined as an internal function called can save. So what we're effectively doing is taking a function right here, can save, and we're making it appear like a property. So now we don't have to use the parentheses inside of the HTML to call can save. So what's can save going to do? Well, we're going to set an internal variable saying, hey, are you saving or aren't you? So if I'm in the middle of saving, this variable is going to be set to true. And just to save some space here, we'll put it all in one line. Now, of course, we need to have this variable, so we'll define that up top too. And by default, we'll set that to false. So let's take a quick look at that one. This can save property is going to be defined on VM. It's effectively going to create us a VM.canSave. And that's going to be a property. And then back in our HTML, we've got the can save right there. And notice we don't have to use parentheses there because it's a property. And that property is going to be bound to it on the HTML, and then here it's going to call for its getter, the can save function. So by default, you can always save because we set it to false. Next, we should wire up the cancel, the save, and the go back. We'll start with go back because that's the easiest. So I'll come down here, put it at the bottom. And go back is a pretty simple one. We just want to use the window service, which comes with Angular, which wraps up the window object for us. And we're going to use its window history back. And again, it's a one-liner, so I'll put it all in one line. So when we call go back, it's going to use the Windows service to go to history back and basically go back to whatever page it came from. Now we're going to need that Windows service, so let's inject that. So now you can see that guy there. It ends up getting injected down here. Next up, let's wire in the cancel and the save. So we'll create a function down here for cancel. And this is the point where you have to ask yourself, should cancel be doing anything here or should it be calling somewhere else? And the right answer is it should be calling somewhere else, because anytime we cancel or save, that's really the job of the data context to let you know, because the data context is going to know about all the changes that we have, so it's either going to be able to save them or cancel them. And that's the role of the data context. It's not the role of each controller. So first, let's go up to cancel. And for this guy, we're going to call the data context. And he doesn't yet have this property, but we're going to give it to him. It's going to be data context cancel. So we'll do a to-do right here. And that's all the code that we're going to need for a cancel inside the controller. Makes it kind of simple. But there's one other time that we want to cancel. What if, for some reason, the controller gets destroyed? And in that case, what we want to do is make sure that we actually cancel there too. So let's make a little wrapper function called onDestroy. And here we're going to use the scope. And the scope is a service that we're going to use. It actually helps us with the data binding between the controller and the view. We're having to use the controller as syntax, but it also does some other features. And one of those is can listen for messages. So in this case, here's going to be a message from an event, which is going to be, hey, I've been destroyed. And when that happens, we're going to call this function right here. We're just saying, okay, somebody destroyed me. In this case, I want to call data context cancel, which again, we need to write. Now, who's going to wire this function up? Well, we have to call him somewhere. So in activate, we're going to wire up this event handler. So now we've handled our canceling, and now we've got to handle the save. So first, when I'm saving, I'm going to set isSaving to equal to true. And then we're going to call the data context again. So we're going to call data context.save. And then when it's done, we're going to get a promise back, just like we do for all of our async operations. And that promise is going to return back to us a save result. This comes from Breeze. Breeze lets us know what happened with that save. And if it was successful, what we really want to know is, okay, now turn isSaving back to false. And if it wasn't successful, then we can call a different function. This is going to be the error function, and we'll get information about what went wrong. And for now, we're just going to assume everything worked there. We're going to set isSaving to false for that one too. And we'll have to put a to-do here as well because we want to write this. So we have to write both the data context save right here and the save for the cancel, which is up top. We've got our to-dos in place. But before we write those, you may be wondering why we're actually going to the data context. Well, the data context is basically our unit of work. It's the place that has a handle on all the other repositories. The repositories are going to get our data and handle it for us. But the way Breeze works is it allows us through the manager to basically build up all of our changes. So the data context is where the manager, and the manager knows about all the changes that you've been applying. And when you want to save them, you can just call a method called save, which will basically aggregate across all the different types of entities. Not making sense yet? Don't worry. We're about to code it, and it'll all become clear. So first, let's look at our cancel. He's good to go. And then the other step is in the save, because we're returning a promise, it's just good habit to make sure that we return back the promise here as well, in case somebody ever calls this save method. So now let's flip over into data context. That's going to be in our services. And notice so far we just have this prime method. Well, we're going to have to add a cancel and a save. Let's do the cancel first. We'll come down right below the init, and then we'll put the cancel in place. And remember, I said that Breeze makes it really easy to cancel. Well, you know what? All we have to do is call reject changes for Breeze. And boom, that's it. It's canceled. It handles it all for us. And then, because we want to know and let the user know as well, more importantly, that something happened, we're going to say we cancel the changes. And there's no data to put into the console, which is the second parameter, and we do want to put up a message. So that's what the third parameter is going to mean. So our cancel is done. Now let's write the save method. We'll come down here, and we'll keep them alphabetical. We'll put it below the prime. And again, Breeze makes it easier for us. We just call the manager's save changes method. And because this is a promise, we're going to return that. And then when it's done, we're going to call toQ, so we can turn it into $2.Q. And we'll have a nice little method inside of here for what happens when we have a successful save, and then what happens when we have a failure of a save. So now let's write each one of those. When save succeeds, what do we want to do? Any ideas? Well, we're going to get the result back. Why don't we go ahead and log the information that, hey, we had a good and successful save. So we'll use log success again, say, hey, we saved the data. And then if it failed, we'll do something similar here. In this case, we're not getting a result, we're getting back error information. And now let's put a message together for what happened. So we've got a message variable, and we're going to go into the config app error prefix. Let's take a quick look at that again. So back down into the config file, we have an app error prefix right there, which is just a prefix for all of our messages so we know which app it came from. It makes it nice and easy to identify. And we're saying, hey, the save failed. And not only did it fail, but Breeze has this nice little helper function, which is going to help us. It's the save error message service. Breeze likes those long names, but at least they're descriptive. And this guy here is going to call off to get error message. And it's going to pass in the error, and it's actually going to dig out the error message for us and format it. So now we've got it in a nice message. We're going to go ahead and take that error and the message itself and set our custom message on it. And then we're going to log the error using our log error function. This is going to print it to the console window, and if we'd like, we can print it up on the screen. And then finally, we're going to throw the error. So basically what we did is we took the error, we did something with the message, and then we logged it and we rethrew it. Do you have to do so much for failure conditions? Well, no, but you really should, and your users are going to thank you. And the nice thing about this is any kind of a failure on save is now handled, which means back in my controller, remember that really simple logic we had for saving? We just called data context save and we're done. We set this little variable. That's easy because we don't have to handle errors in all of our controllers for saving. Could we? Absolutely. We could catch it here if we want to. We have that control. But back in the data context now, we know that we're safe because this guy here is going to handle all the errors for us. And if we want to override it, we could. So now we should be able to run the app and make some changes and try to save them. And one final tip that I always recommend, because I always get caught on this myself, is when you're putting new code in place, especially inside your JavaScript, make sure any new services that you're using, like Window, that you're actually putting dependencies up top, like right there. Now, I happen to know inside of the onDestroy, we've got the scope that we're using, so we do want to pass that in as well. So we need to inject it. If I didn't do this, I would get an error on the page, and it's actually quite obvious. So let me show you that here. So to avoid the error, what we want to do is we want to have the scope there and right up here, and all your services need to be there. Let's make a purposeful error, and let's actually remove those just for a moment. We'll take those both out, and let's run the application. Now we run our app, we go over to speakers, and we click on Aaron. Bam! Scope is not defined. Well, we knew that, and the nice thing is here, Toaster's telling us this. Well, if we didn't have Toaster, we would just get this little spinner, things would be bad, and now I'd have to open up the development tools to see what the real error is. Luckily, we don't have to do that. So we're going to come back in here, I'm just going to Control-Z, and we're going to stick scope right back in. And now we can run our app. We'll click on speakers, and let's pick somebody different this time. Have my good friend Glenn Block. And come down here, there's Glenn. Let's make sure we have no errors inside the debug console. There's our one mapping error, which is the Google map or the Bing map on the front page. We'll clear that baby out. Now we've got him in place, and let's go ahead and make sure we make a change. Let's change Glenn's name to Mary. Haha, sorry Glenn. And then here we've got the change, and now we can press save, and notice it gets disabled for a moment, and then it re-enables. Let's watch that again, and the save happened. Let's change Mary to something else. How about Sam? So when I do this, let's take a quick look and focus on these particular buttons right there. They're enabled right now, but when I press save, it's going to be disabled and then re-enabled quickly. Disabled, re-enabled. So let's take a look and make sure that things are actually happening the way we think they are. Over in the Network tab, you saw who's saved changes right here. First it was the Mary, and then there was the Sam. So we come over here, we should see first name was Mary, right there. And then if we click on the second one, we should see first name of Sam, right here. So our data is going across the wire the way we think it is. Well, let's do a cancel, and we'll keep that open right now. So let's change Sam to Gary. Now let's cancel it. No network activity, but yet we see canceled changes, and right up here, you're going to see that, hey, look, it's back to Sam. We're not Gary. So we can see that we got the cancel in place and the save, and everything's working just peachy. We just enabled saving and canceling of the data. So we've got these two buttons here, but we want to make sure we can enable or disable them, not just during a save, but also if there are no changes on the screen. I mean, after all, if nobody makes a change, let's not let them save nothing. So the trick, of course, is finding out how do we know if any changes have occurred, which brings us to change detection. So what we really want to do is basically put some features in here to enable or disable the buttons when there are no changes, and then enable them when there are. So this asterisk right here, we're going to add this to the application, and we're going to animate it in whenever there are any changes. So if I type in a different first name for Brad Green, like Bradley, then it automatically detects the change, enables the buttons for cancel and save, and puts the asterisk there. And to do this, we're going to take advantage of both Angular for its messaging and Breeze for some of its features for change detection. We're going to rely on our good friend Breeze and the manager to make sure that we can handle when changes have been detected. So that's going to happen inside the data context because that's the guy who handles all of our Breeze manager. So we go to the bottom down here. Let's write some code underneath the save. We'll minimize him. Now we'll write this code on the fly and then we'll refactor it as we need it. Basically there's a manager object that Breeze has, and it's got this method on it called hasChangesChanged. So funny name, serious sandwich. Basically, has changes is one thing, that's going to tell you if it has changes, and then we want to know not if it has changes, but we need to be notified when the changes has changed. So anytime somebody changes something, this event's going to fire, and we're going to subscribe to it. So Breeze allows us to tap into this, and we're going to call this callback function. It's going to pass us some event args, and then when that happens, we want to be able to take action. So what we're going to do is going to customize it just a little bit. I'm going to make my own little message in here, and I'm going to create an object. I'll call this data, and I'll put a property on it called hasChanges, and that is going to be basically this event args.hasChanges. So it's going to send the message across to us, and we're going to grab out of the event args, does it have changes or doesn't it? And then this will refire an event, and we're going to make our own event in this case using the common service, which will then broadcast out using the Angular broadcast service, and that's exposed already on the common service. And we're going to have to create our own event. And since I don't like magic strings, we're going to create an event inside the config.js, and we're going to call this thing events hasChangesChanged, and we'll pass as a parameter data. So what we're effectively doing is sending our own message, and then we have to ask someone to receive it. So this will send the message, and the controller is going to receive it. Now we don't just want this to run willy-nilly anywhere. We'll wrap this inside of a function, and we'll call this something like setup event for hasChangesChanged. So in honor of the long names of Breeze, we'll use a very long named function here. But at least we don't need to comment it because we know exactly what it's doing. So then we'll take that, and we want to fire that off right in the beginning of everything. So when this data context kicks up, it's then going to basically set up a listener for the hasChangesChanged from Breeze, and then whenever this actually gets listened to, when changes occur, it's going to then fire our own message, and we're going to pass in just the piece that we want to know about. So it's always good to scrub through and make sure the new code we wrote doesn't use anything new. For example, do we have common? We'll have to make sure we do. And do we have this thing called events? Let's go back up to the top. And we do indeed have common, but we don't have events. Now, events is something that's inside the config. So let's go ahead and set that up. Events is basically just a shortcut from events inside of the config service. So now we have events, but do we have config? We do not. So let's go ahead and add that up top. And we'll put it here as a dependency. And let's flip back over to config. And now we scroll down a little, we see we have two events already, one for the controller activate, the other for the spinner toggle. So we're going to add a new one inside of here. And what's the name of that guy? Let's go back down to setup event, and let's go ahead and grab it here. It's events hasChangesChanged. And then here we just give it a string name. And I like to label these a little more explicitly. And again, because we don't like magic strings, now I have all my events labeled in one place inside of the config.js. So who's listening to this event? Well, that's going to happen inside of speaker details. So we'll set up an event handler in here to listen for when changes have occurred. Of course, it doesn't exist yet, so we'll go down and we'll write that. So when this controller activates, it's going to then listen for this onHasChanges. And to do that, it's going to use scope. And the scope service exposes this on, which basically, again, will listen for a message. And we could put in the name of the message here, or again, because we have config events, now we can say config events hasChangesChanged. And that's going to listen for that specific message that comes across. And when that happens, We can call this callback function right here, and it's going to pass to us some information about what changed. First will be the event, and the second is going to be the data for that event. And what do we want to do? We want to set a local property here called hasChanges, and we're going to set it equal to the data.hasChanges. So we're just really relaying the information up from the data context. So the data context sees a change. The manager is going to notify us for us. So basically it's got this event, we subscribe to it, and then we're taking that event and just grabbing off not all the arguments, but just the one piece that we need, which happens to be the event args hasChanges. We're tapping that into a data object, and then that data object right here is going to get passed in to this event, and this event is then going to be fired off using the common broadcast, and that's the event hasChanges changed. And then finally, the speaker detail says when he wires up, hey, if anybody over here is ever listening for this particular event, I'm going to be here, I'm going to receive it, and I'm going to process that and then set the hasChanges right here. We also want to make sure hasChanges is defaulted at the beginning, so we'll go back up to the top and we'll set VM hasChanges equal to false, because by default, we're not going to have any changes. There's one last thing we should try too. So right here in the can save, we're only allowing people to save if they weren't in the middle of a save. We also want to check though to see if we have changes. So we're going to check in here to see you can save if you have changes and you're not in the middle of a save. Now because we did this as an internal function here, and this property again is just going to expose it through the property can save, through the ES5 defined property, then back up inside the view, we should be good to go. Let's take a look in the view. Now over here we've got our buttons, and those are all wired up to can saves, right like here. But we still need some kind of an indicator inside the view. So right below these buttons, in the HTML, which will put it side by side on the screen, we'll create a span, and we'll use a couple directives that are built into Angular to make this work. First, we want to show what's inside of this span, which will be an asterisk, whenever hasChanges happens to be true. I also want to use an animation though. So I'm going to take advantage of the animations that we have, and one of them is called dissolve animation. And I want to make sure I've got something inside the span. So here I'm going to use an icon again, a little bit of a helper. We'll use the icon for an asterisk, which actually just looks kind of cool. We'll create icon-asterisk, and we'll make it a larger one. But let's run and see what happens. Our error handling should tell us what went wrong, if anything did. And something did go wrong. So I won't ruin the surprise here. When we click on this, you will see. Right there's problem number one. Config is not defined. We've seen this before. We just basically forgot to have some kind of a dependency injected. So I'll first check to see where is config having the issue. And right here inside of speaker detail, I used config on that new code I wrote, but I probably didn't inject it up top. And lo and behold, I did not. So there, we have to inject him, and we'll keep it alphabetical. And again, the sequence is important. Whatever you do up here has to be in the same order as what you do in the parameters down here. Now there's one other issue. It's not actually an error, but it's something I'd like to improve on. So first let's run it, make sure we get past the error. We'll open up the F12 developer tools, we'll refresh, clears out the cache, go back into speakers, and now we'll click into Aaron. And now no errors, which is good. We'll go over here and just make sure we get no errors. We'll clear that out. That was the map error. And now when we type something in here, we should see something happen with Aaron. So we'll change Aaron's name from Aaron to Fred, and boom. There we have the asterisk. Okay, let's change it back to something like Eric. Still see the same asterisk, it's not changing. That's good. Now if I cancel, it should go away. Perfect. Now if I click the back button, we're good. So we go back into somebody else like Colleen, and here we go. We can type in 1, 2, 3. We slowly animate in the asterisk. Hey, there were changes over here. And we can cancel them, and it just disappears. That's all good. Now I mentioned something that wasn't quite right yet. So as I change, you can see things animating in and then canceling, they animate back out. Or if I change the name to Colleen123 and save it, it'll disappear as well. Actually, when you first come in, the asterisk may appear quickly before Angular kicks in and then disappear. So you might see a little flash. So to avoid that, one way to get rid of that quick flash is to do a little more with the animations. So right here in the class, instead of just doing dissolve animation, we're going to stick in a class called ngHide. And this guy here was actually defined back in our index.html earlier. Right here at the top of the page, the hot tile template puts this in for us. And this is really here, and I put the comment in place to help you. So you know that it's going to help make sure the animation starts the right place for the show and the hide type animations, right there. Why? Because if Angular isn't ready to go, like when the app first loads up on that screen, you might see a flash. to really make sure we understand how the events are working here, let's go ahead and debug the application in Chrome. First, what we're going to be watching is this new function we wrote. We're going to make sure we know when that actually got listened to and then when this common broadcast fired off. And then we should see it being picked up inside of the speaker detail.js right here. The onHasChanges is basically going to wire up that listener, and then it's going to listen for this particular event right there, and then when it's done, it's going to set this property. So we should be able to watch this. We'll close some of the other tabs. We'll open up the developer tools. We'll make it nice and big. And here, let's click on the speakers. We'll go and watch Brad. And then inside of here, let's go ahead and open up the sources under App. And let's go down to Services. We'll find the data context. Now, there's a couple ways you can search for things in here. One is you can do Control F and then look for a function. Now, we know we have this hasChanges that we have to look for. So we can see that's exactly where it is. We want to see when that's actually being rebroadcast. So another way we can do this is go down to the speaker and look at the speaker details. Inside of here, again, we'll look for changes, and we can see a couple different instances of it. And down here, we'll set a breakpoint by clicking in the margin. So we've got our two breakpoints, and here we've got the speaker details and the data context. So now, let's make a change happen. We'll change Brad to J. And as soon as we type in J, bam. Right in here, the data context sees that. We're going to broadcast out this method. That's going to be the name of the event. And then here's the data we're going to be sending. Our data is going to have simply just hasChanges true. And the reason we wrap that up again is because if you look inside the event args, what gets sent out, there's an entity manager constructor and a bunch of other things inside of here. We just didn't need it for our application. So we'll remove that breakpoint, and I'll hit F8 to let it keep running. And now inside the controller, it's catching that event. So here it's going to say, all right, what's this data hasChanges? That's true. Remember, the data is the package we sent through the message. And then we're going to set the property here. It's set to false right now. Let's hit F10 once. It should be set to true now. It is, and as soon as we let it run, we should see the asterisk show up over here, and the button should re-enable. So now I'll press F8 after getting rid of the debugger, and boom, we animate in. So what we've seen here is a way that we can use messaging through Angular and send a message from Breeze to say, hey, something's changed here, and then listen to that inside the controller using $scope. So we combined Breeze, Angular messaging, and Angular animations with data binding, all with just a couple lines of code. So let's take a look back at what we accomplished in this module. We finished up the editing of the speakers, and we added in a cancel feature so we can make changes and then allow the user to cancel them, revert their changes. Of course, we followed that with allowing them to save their changes, and we used some features in Breeze to allow us to do change detection easily, combining that with messaging through Angular so we could show the users when changes have occurred and then allow them to save them. And this rounded out the features for the editing of the speakers page.